My name is Helen, and I am 54 years old now. Christmas has always meant family love and the warmth of those we cherish most. The smell of fresh baked cookies, twinkling lights, the pure joy of giving. For 20 years, I raised my son Marcus alone, sacrificing everything so he could have a good life. But last Christmas, my son handed me a napkin with 3 words that shattered everything I believed about motherhood. That napkin changed my life, but not in the way you might think. Before I continue with this story, I would love to know where you are watching from today. Drop your location in the comments below. If you believe that a mother's love deserves to be recognized, please hit that like button and subscribe to this channel. Stay with me through this journey because what happened exactly 1 week later will show you that sometimes the deepest wounds can lead to the most unexpected healing. Now let me take you back to where it all began. I met Derek when I was 23 years old. It was a rainy Tuesday afternoon at a small coffee shop in Portland, Oregon. I was working as a waitress trying to save money for college when this charming man with bright blue eyes walked in. He ordered a black coffee and asked for my number before he even took his first sip. There was something magnetic about him, something that made me believe every word that came out of his mouth. We dated for 2 years, and during that time, Derek painted pictures of the future that seemed too beautiful to be real. He talked about the house we would buy, the children we would have, the life we would build together. I was young and hopeful, and I fell for every promise. We got married when I was 25 in a small ceremony at the courthouse because Derek said big weddings were a waste of money. I should have seen that as a sign, but love has a way of making us blind. 2 years later, I gave birth to Marcus. The moment I held my baby boy in my arms, I knew that my life had found its true purpose. Marcus had his father's eyes, but my stubborn spirit, and I loved him more than I ever thought possible. For a few years, things seemed good. Not perfect, but good enough. Derek worked as a real estate agent, and I stayed home with Marcus because daycare was too expensive, and Derek insisted that a mother should raise her own child. But slowly, things began to change. Derek started coming home later and later. He would miss dinner, miss bedtime stories, miss the little moments that make up a family. When I asked him about it, he always had excuses: work meetings, client dinners, networking events. I wanted to believe him because the alternative was too painful to consider. When Marcus was 7 years old, I found out the truth. I was doing laundry when I discovered a receipt in Derek's jacket pocket. It was from a jewelry store for a necklace that cost $500. I had never received any necklace. My heart sank as I realized what this meant. I confronted Derek that night after Marcus went to bed. He did not even try to deny it. Her name was Brenda, his coworker. He said he had fallen out of love with me, that I had become boring, that I was not the woman he married anymore. He packed his bags that same night and left. Just like that. 7 years of marriage, and he walked out the door without looking back. The divorce was finalized 3 months later. The court ordered Derek to pay child support, but he moved to Texas with Brenda, and those checks never came. I called, I sent letters, I even hired a lawyer, but Derek was good at hiding his money. Eventually, I had to accept that I was on my own. I got 2 jobs to make ends meet. During the day, I worked as a cashier at a grocery store. At night, I waitressed at a local diner. The tips were not great, but every dollar counted. I sold my wedding ring to pay the first month's rent on a tiny apartment. I did not buy new clothes for myself for 5 years. I learned to cut my own hair, to sew patches on worn-out jeans to make one meal stretch into 3. There were nights when I would lie awake staring at the ceiling, wondering how I would pay for Marcus's school supplies or his winter coat. But when morning came, I would put on a smile and make pancakes, shaped like dinosaurs, because my son deserved a happy childhood, even if I was falling apart inside. I remember when Marcus was 9 years old and got pneumonia. The hospital bills were astronomical, and our insurance barely covered anything. I sold my car, the old Honda Civic that had been with me since college, just to pay for his treatment. For the next 2 years, I took the bus everywhere, waking up at 4 in the morning to make sure I got to work on time. When Marcus was 12, he wanted to go to baseball summer camp. All his friends were going, and he begged me for weeks. I did not have the money, but I could not bear to see the disappointment in his eyes. So I took on extra night shifts for 3 months straight. I barely slept, barely ate, but when I handed Marcus that camp registration form, the smile on his face made it all worth it. His 13th birthday was another sacrifice I will never forget. He had been talking about a particular bicycle for months. It was red and silver with special gears for mountain trails. It cost more than I made in 2 weeks, so I stopped eating lunch at work. Every day for a month, I packed a lunch that I would secretly throw away, saving that money instead. When Marcus unwrapped that bicycle on his birthday, he hugged me so tight that I could barely breathe. He never knew what it cost me. I never told Marcus about our financial struggles. I never wanted him to feel like a burden or to worry about things that children should not have to worry about. When he asked why we did not have a bigger house or a nicer car, I simply told him that we had everything we needed because we had each other. My sacrifices paid off. Marcus was a brilliant student. He worked hard, earned scholarships, and got accepted into a prestigious university. I was there on his graduation day, sitting in the front row, tears streaming down my face. My son had become an engineer. All those sleepless nights, all those skipped meals, all those years of struggle had led to this moment. It was worth everything. After college, Marcus got a job at a major tech company in Seattle. He was making more money in 1 month than I made in a year. I was so proud of him, so grateful that he would never have to struggle the way I did. And through it all, I never spoke badly about Derek. When Marcus asked about his father, I simply said that his father had his own path to walk. I refused to be the kind of mother who poisoned her child against his other parent, no matter how much that parent deserved it. For nearly 20 years, Derek was nothing more than a ghost. He never called on Marcus's birthdays. He never showed up for graduations or holidays. He existed only in old photographs and faded memories. I had made peace with his absence, and I assumed Marcus had too. Then, when Marcus was 26 years old, everything changed. It started with a Facebook message. Derek had found Marcus on social media and reached out. He wanted to reconnect, to make up for lost time, to be a father again. Marcus showed me the message, his eyes filled with a mixture of hope and confusion. I will admit my first instinct was to tell Marcus to ignore it. This was the man who had abandoned us, who had broken every promise, who had left a 7-year-old boy wondering why his daddy did not love him anymore. But I looked at my son now, a grown man, and I saw something in his eyes that I recognized. It was the same longing I had felt as a child when my own father was distant. Marcus needed to know his father, even if that father did not deserve him. So I swallowed my pain and said the words that would eventually lead to my own destruction. I told Marcus that Derek was his father and he deserved to make his own decision. I told him that I would support whatever he chose. Marcus chose to meet Derek. The first visit was just a weekend trip to Houston. Derek had done well for himself, apparently. He owned a real estate company, now lived in a big house, drove fancy cars. Brenda had left him years ago, which gave me a small sense of satisfaction, though I am not proud of that. Marcus came back from that trip with a new Rolex watch on his wrist, a gift from his father. Over the next 2 years, Marcus visited Derek more and more frequently. Each time he came back, something was different. He would call me less often. Our weekly phone calls became monthly, then sporadic. When we did talk, his voice seemed colder, more distant. Then came the comments. Marcus started saying things that made my blood run cold. He told me that Derek said I had never let him see Marcus when he was little. That was a lie. Derek had never even asked for visitation. Marcus said that Derek claimed I had taken all his money in the divorce. Another lie. I had gotten nothing except the responsibility of raising our son alone. Marcus said that Derek told him I had poisoned him against his father all these years. I wanted to scream. I wanted to pull out every document, every unpaid child support notice, every unanswered letter I had sent begging Derek to be part of his son's life. But I could not bring myself to do it. I had spent 20 years protecting Marcus from the ugly truth about his father. I was not about to start bad-mouthing Derek now, even if Derek had no such reservations about me. So I simply said that there are 2 sides to every story, and I hoped Marcus would remember who had been there for him all these years. But the damage was being done. I could feel my son slipping away, and I did not know how to stop it. The first Thanksgiving after Derek's return was the hardest. Marcus had always come home for Thanksgiving. It was our tradition. I would make his favorite dishes, and we would watch football together, and he would tell me about his life in Seattle. But that year, Marcus called me 3 days before the holiday. He said he was going to spend Thanksgiving with his father. He said Derek wanted to make up for all the Thanksgivings he had missed. He said he hoped I would understand. I told him I understood. What else could I say? I ate Thanksgiving dinner alone that year. I had made a small turkey breast just enough for one person, along with mashed potatoes and green beans. I set the table for two out of habit, then quietly removed the extra place setting. I called Marcus after dinner, but he answered in a hurry, laughing at something in the background, and said he would call me back. He never did. That night, I sat in my kitchen and cried. Not loud, dramatic sobs, but quiet tears that seemed to come from somewhere very deep. I felt like I was losing my son, and I had no idea how to get him back. When Marcus invited me to spend Christmas at Derek's house in Houston, I was surprised. We had barely spoken in weeks, and now he wanted me to fly across the country to celebrate with the man who had abandoned us. But there was something in Marcus's voice, something that sounded almost like the little boy I remembered, that made me say yes. I spent weeks preparing for that trip. I wanted to give Marcus something meaningful, something that would remind him of our bond. I decided to give him my father's pocket watch. My father had passed away when I was in my 30s, and that watch was the only thing of his I had kept. It was old and not worth much money, but it was priceless to me. I wrote a long letter to go with it, telling Marcus about his grandfather, about our family history, about how much I loved him. I also bought a new dress for the occasion, the first new piece of clothing I had purchased for myself in years. It was dark green, simple but elegant. I wanted to look nice. I wanted Derek to see that I had survived without him, that I had thrived. The flight to Houston was nerve-wracking. I kept touching the box containing my father's watch, making sure it was still in my bag. I rehearsed what I would say to Derek, how I would be polite but distant. I told myself that this trip was about Marcus, not about me or my feelings about his father. Derek's house was everything I had expected and dreaded. It was enormous, with white columns and a circular driveway and enough rooms to house a small army. There were professional Christmas decorations everywhere, the kind that cost more than my monthly rent. A woman in a uniform answered the door and led me to the living room, where Derek waited with a glass of wine in his hand. He looked older, of course, with gray at his temples and lines around his eyes, but he still had that same charming smile, the one that had fooled me so many years ago. He welcomed me warmly, a little too warmly, and introduced me to his friends who had gathered for the holiday. I noticed the way they looked at me, with a mixture of curiosity and something that looked like pity. I wondered what Derek had told them about me. Marcus hugged me when I arrived, but it felt different. There was a stiffness to it, a formality that had never existed between us before. I pushed down my unease and tried to enjoy the evening. The Christmas dinner was elaborate. There was a huge turkey, a glazed ham, at least a dozen side dishes. Derek made a toast about family and second chances, and I noticed he did not look at me when he said it. Marcus sat beside his father, laughing at his jokes, hanging on his every word. I felt like a stranger at someone else's party. After dinner came the gift exchange. Marcus stood up, his face glowing with excitement. He said he had something special for his father. He led everyone outside to the garage, where a beautiful black BMW sat with a giant red bow on the hood. It was a $50,000 car, and Marcus presented it to Derek like it was the most natural thing in the world. Derek embraced Marcus, tears in his eyes, thanking him profusely. Everyone applauded. I stood in the back, clapping along, trying to be happy for them. I reminded myself that Marcus had worked hard for his money and could spend it however he wanted. I reminded myself that this was not about me. Then it was my turn. Marcus walked over to me, and I noticed his hands were empty. No gift bag, no wrapped box, nothing. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded napkin. He handed it to me and said this was for me. I was confused. I thought maybe it was a joke, a lead-up to a real present. I unfolded the napkin carefully, expecting to find a gift card or a note telling me to look somewhere else. Instead, I found 3 words written in black marker. Worst mom ever. The room went silent. I stared at those words, my brain refusing to process what my eyes were seeing. I looked up at Marcus, searching his face for any sign that this was a prank, a misunderstanding, anything but what it appeared to be. His expression was cold, almost satisfied. He told me that now I knew how his father had felt all these years. He said Derek had told him everything about how I had kept them apart, how I had lied, how I had been the villain of their story. I could not speak. My throat had closed up and my hands were shaking so badly that the napkin fluttered to the floor. I looked around the room at the faces of strangers, saw Derek's Small smile saw my son's defiant stare. I do not remember exactly what I did next. I know I picked up the box containing my father's watch and set it on the table. I know I walked out of that house without saying goodbye. I know I drove to my hotel in complete silence, my mind as blank as a fresh sheet of paper. It was not until I pulled into the hotel parking lot that I broke down. I sat in that rental car and sobbed until I could not breathe. 20 years. 20 years of sacrifice, of struggle, of putting my son's needs before my own. And this was how it ended. 3 words on a napkin. Worst mom ever. I changed my flight and flew back to Portland that same night. I could not stay in Texas for another minute. The plane ride was a blur of tears and tissues and concerned looks from flight attendants. I did not care what anyone thought. I was beyond caring about anything. When I got home, I did not turn on the lights. I just stood in my living room looking at the Christmas tree I had decorated in anticipation of Marcus's visit. He had promised to come to Portland after Christmas. We were going to have our own celebration, just the two of us. The presents I had bought for him were still under the tree, wrapped in his favorite blue paper. I sat down on the couch and stared at that tree until the sun came up. My mind was racing with questions. What had I done wrong? Where had I failed? Maybe I really had been a terrible mother. Maybe Derek was right. Maybe everything I believed about myself was a lie. For the next few days, I barely functioned. I called in sick to work. I stopped eating. I would pick up my phone to call Marcus, then put it down again. What would I say? How could I defend myself against accusations I did not fully understand? On the third night, I decided to pour myself a drink. I am not much of a drinker, but I thought maybe alcohol would help me sleep. I went to the kitchen cabinet where I kept a bottle of wine, but my hand bumped against something else. A wooden box I had not opened in years. I pulled it out and sat down at the kitchen table. The box was full of old documents, papers I had kept but tried to forget. I had not looked at them in over a decade, not since Marcus had grown old enough that I thought the past no longer mattered. I started going through the contents, and with each document, something inside me shifted. There was the divorce decree clearly stating that the marriage ended due to Derek's infidelity. There were the child support orders, pages and pages of them, showing how much Derek owed and how little he had paid. There were medical bills with my name on them, receipts for Marcus's clothes and school supplies and summer camps. There were letters I had written to Derek begging him to call his son to visit to be a father. He had never responded to a single one. And then I found it. A letter in Derek's handwriting dated when Marcus was 10 years old. It was a response to my request for back child support. In it, Derek wrote that he knew he should send money, but Brenda needed a new car and he was sure I could manage. He said Marcus was young and would not remember any of this anyway. I read that letter 3 times. Something cold and hard settled in my chest, replacing the despair I had been feeling. For 20 years, I had protected Derek. I had shielded Marcus from the truth about his father because I did not want my son to carry that pain. I had let Derek become a mystery instead of a villain, and Derek had used my silence against me. He had filled that silence with lies, rewriting history to make himself the victim and me the monster. No more. I spent the next several hours scanning every document in that box. I composed an email to Marcus, not angry, not accusatory, just honest. I told him that I had never wanted him to see his father in a negative light, which was why I had never shared these things. But I could not let lies define who I was. I attached every piece of evidence I had and told him to read it all, then make his own decision about what to believe. I sent the email at 3 a.m. and went to bed feeling something I had not felt in days. Peace. Whatever happened next, at least I had finally told the truth. The next morning, I woke up feeling different, lighter somehow despite everything. I made myself breakfast for the first time since Christmas. I showered, got dressed, and went for a walk around my neighborhood. The air was cold and crisp, and I breathed it in deeply. I did not check my email. I did not look at my phone. Whatever Marcus was doing with the information I had sent it was out of my hands now. I had spent 2 decades carrying the weight of silence. Now it was time to let it go. 2 days passed with no word from Marcus. I was not surprised. The documents I had sent contained a lot of information, and Marcus would need time to process it all. I kept myself busy with small tasks around the house, trying not to think too much. Meanwhile, Marcus was in Seattle, his world falling apart. He told me later what happened during those days, how he had opened my email expecting more manipulation, more lies, how he had started reading the documents with skepticism, looking for signs of forgery or exaggeration, how his skepticism had slowly turned to confusion, then shock, then horror. He saw the medical bills from when he had pneumonia. Every single one was in my name. Derek had not contributed a penny. He saw the emails where Derek refused to send money for basic necessities. He saw the court documents showing that Derek owed over $23,000 in unpaid child support. But what broke him, he said, was finding the letter about Brenda's car. His father had chosen a vehicle for his mistress over medicine for his sick son. It was right there, in black and white in Derek's own handwriting. Marcus called Derek that same day. He told me he had tried to stay calm to give his father a chance to explain. He asked about the documents, about the child support, about the letter. Derek stumbled over his words. He said I had fabricated everything. When Marcus pointed out that the letter was in Derek's handwriting, Derek changed tactics. He started blaming me, saying I had driven him away, that I had made it impossible for him to be a father. Marcus said something clicked in that moment. He recognized the pattern, the way Derek always deflected, always blamed someone else. It was the same thing Derek had been doing for 2 years, painting me as the villain while positioning himself as the victim. Marcus had believed it because it was easier than asking the hard questions about why his father had really left. Marcus started making phone calls. He called his Aunt Ruth, my sister, who had been there through all those difficult years. Ruth did not hold back. She told Marcus about the nights I had cried myself to sleep, the meals I had skipped, the clothes I had mended instead of replaced. She told him about the time I had sold my grandmother's jewelry to pay for his braces. Then Marcus called his grandmother, my mother, who was living in a nursing home in California. She was 81 years old, and her memory was not what it used to be, but she remembered enough. She told Marcus that I had given up everything for him, that I had turned down marriage proposals from good men because I was too focused on raising him, that I could have had a different life, but I had chosen him instead. By the time Marcus finished those calls, he was sitting alone in his apartment, holding the napkin he had given me. 3 words that now felt like poison in his hands. He thought about my face when I had read it, the way all the light had gone out of my eyes. He thought about 20 years of birthday parties and sick days and homework help. He thought about all the times I had said nothing bad about his father, even when I had every right to. Marcus told me he cried for hours that night. Not just tears, but deep, wrenching sobs that shook his entire body. He had done something unforgivable, and he knew it. Exactly 1 week after Christmas, I was in my kitchen making dinner when my phone rang. Marcus's name appeared on the screen. I stared at it for a long moment. Part of me wanted to answer immediately, to hear my son's voice, to tell him everything was okay. But another part of me, a part I had ignored for too long, told me to wait. I had spent my whole life putting Marcus first. Maybe it was time to put myself first just this once. I let the phone ring. Then I let it ring again when he called back. And again. The 4th time, I answered. The voice on the other end was not the cold, distant Marcus who had handed me that napkin. It was the voice of a little boy, broken and scared. He said my name like a question, like he was not sure I would still claim him. Then he started crying. He begged me not to do this, not to leave him. He said he was sorry, over and over, the words tumbling out between sobs. I listened in silence, my own eyes filling with tears. Part of me wanted to immediately forgive, to tell him to come home, to pretend none of this had ever happened, but I knew that would not be fair to either of us. When he finally paused to breathe, I spoke. I told him that I forgave him, that I would always love him no matter what, that he was my son and nothing could ever change that. But then I told him something else, something I had never said before. I told him that forgiveness did not mean everything went back to normal. I told him that he had broken something precious between us, and it would take time and effort to rebuild it. I told him that I needed space to heal, and he needed to show me through his actions that he understood what he had done. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Then he said he understood. He said he would do whatever it took. He told me that he had already returned the car to Derek and cut off contact with his father. He said he could not look at the man who had lied to him for 2 years. I did not feel satisfaction at this news. I did not want Marcus to hate his father. I just wanted him to know the truth and make his own choices based on that truth. Whatever relationship he chose to have with Derek going forward was his decision. We talked for over an hour that night. Marcus asked questions about the past, about things he had never thought to ask before. I answered honestly for the first time ever. I told him about the struggles, the sacrifices, the moments when I was not sure we would make it. I also told him about the joys, the small victories, the pride I felt watching him grow into a good man. When we finally hung up, I felt something I had not felt in a long time. Hope. The months that followed were not easy. Healing never is. But slowly, carefully, Marcus and I began to rebuild our relationship. I started seeing a therapist, something I should have done years ago. She helped me understand that I had spent so long taking care of others that I had forgotten how to take care of myself. She taught me about boundaries, about self-worth, about the importance of speaking my truth, even when it was difficult. I also joined a support group for divorced women. I had resisted the idea at first, thinking I did not need help. But sitting in that circle, listening to other women share their stories, I realized I was not alone. There were others who had sacrificed everything for their children, who had stayed silent to keep the peace, who had put themselves last for so long they had forgotten they mattered. Marcus made good on his promise. He flew to Portland every month, not for a quick visit, but for real time together. We did not do anything fancy. We cooked meals together, went for walks, watched old movies on the couch. We talked about everything and nothing, reconnecting in ways we had not in years. He started visiting his grandmother more often, too. She would tell him stories about me as a child, about his grandfather, about our family history. Marcus said those conversations helped him understand me better. See me not just as his mother, but as a whole person with her own struggles and dreams. The following Christmas was different. Marcus came to Portland, just the two of us in my small house with my modest tree. There was no fancy dinner, no expensive gifts. We made lasagna together, his favorite, and watched the snow fall outside the window. After dinner, Marcus gave me a present. It was a picture frame, simple but beautiful. Inside was a photograph from his kindergarten graduation, a moment I had almost forgotten. In the picture, I was kneeling beside him, my arms wrapped around his tiny body, both of us smiling at the camera. On the back of the frame, Marcus had written something. To the best mom ever. I am sorry it took me so long to see it. I cried when I read those words, but they were different tears than the ones I had shed the year before. These were tears of healing, of reconciliation, of hope. That napkin still exists. I kept it in a drawer not as a reminder of pain, but as a reminder of how far we had come. Those 3 words no longer had power over me. They were just ink on paper, a moment of cruelty that had led unexpectedly to freedom. Because that is what I found in all of this. Freedom. Freedom from the silence that had defined my life for 20 years. Freedom from the need to protect everyone else at the expense of myself. Freedom to tell my truth and let the chips fall where they may. Derek tried to contact me after Marcus cut him off. He sent emails, left voicemails, even showed up at my door once. He wanted to explain, to apologize, to make amends. I did not engage. Some bridges are burned for good reason, and I had no interest in rebuilding that one. Marcus eventually reached his own peace with the situation. He told me that he did not hate his father, but he could not trust him. Maybe someday they would reconnect. Maybe not. Either way, it was his choice to make, not mine. As for me, I learned to live differently. I started a small garden in my backyard, growing tomatoes and herbs and flowers. I took up reading again, something I had abandoned when Marcus was young because there was never enough time. I even took a solo trip to the Oregon coast, my first vacation in over 20 years. I sat on the beach and watched the waves and felt truly peaceful for the first time in as long as I could remember. The lesson I learned from all of this is simple but hard one. Silence is not always golden. Sometimes silence is a weapon that others use against you. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for yourself is speak your truth, even when it is scary, even when it might upset people. I also learned that forgiveness is a process, not an event. You cannot just decide to forgive and have everything be fine. Forgiveness takes time and effort and willingness from both sides. But when it works, when both people are truly committed to healing, the relationship that emerges can be stronger than before. Most importantly, I learned that my worth is not determined by what others say about me. Derek told lies for years, and for a moment, those lies almost destroyed my relationship with my son. But the truth won out in the end. The truth always does, eventually. If you are watching this and you have been silenced, if someone has used your kindness and discretion against you, I want you to know that it is okay to speak up. You do not have to suffer in silence to protect people who do not deserve protection. Your story matters. Your truth matters. You matter. And if you are watching this and you have hurt someone who loved you, it is not too late to make it right. It will not be easy and it will not be quick. But healing is possible. All it takes is honesty, humility, and a willingness to do the hard work. That napkin was supposed to break me. Instead, it set me free. Now, I want to hear from you. Have you ever had to choose between protecting someone and protecting yourself? Have you ever had to break your silence to reveal the truth? Share your story in the comments below. Your experience might help someone else who is going through something similar. If this story touched your heart, please give it a like. If you want to hear more stories about real families and real struggles, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload. And if you know someone who needs to hear this message today, please share this video with them. You never know whose life you might change. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening, and thank you for being part of this community. May you find the courage to speak your truth, the strength to heal from your wounds, and the wisdom to know that you are worthy of love, no matter what anyone else says. Until next time, take care of yourselves and each other.